Good evening, everyone. My name is Reggie and I have the pleasure of serving as the National Campaign Coordinator for Fair Count, a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit that builds long-term power in communities through the census, voting, and redistricting. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's event, Black Men Count, Men of Faith. We're joined this evening by pastors and faith leaders for a candid, real conversation about the COVID-19 vaccines and our community. This is a conversation, so it's interactive. If you have questions, please type them into the chat and we'll get your answers to you, or get answers for you. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our special guests who've joined us tonight. Our first guest is Reverend Ralph Thompson. He's the pastor of the Columbia Drive United Methodist Church. Reverend Thompson, would you like to say hello to all of our audience?
Well, hello, everyone. It is good to see each of you. Reggie, delighted to be with you on this evening. Glad to be here for a wonderful conversation.
Yes, sir. And thank you again, Reverend Thompson, for joining us. We have also with us tonight, Reverend Adrian Chester, who's the pastor of Greater Beelwood Baptist Church. Reverend Chester, would you like to tell our audience hello?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Reggie, and also my cohorts that's serving tonight. I'm grateful to be with you all. I'm reporting all the way live from Columbus, Georgia. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. We have also with us tonight Dr. Wesley Chambers, who's a medical doctor and actually has his own private medical practice, the Chambers Private Medical Practice. Dr. Chambers, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to say hello to everyone?
Greetings, everyone. Good evening. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to have this very important conversation about a very important topic. Just thank everyone for being here and thank you for the opportunity. Thank my fellow panelists.
Yes, sir. And we thank you for joining us. And certainly, last but not least, we have with us Reverend Willie Bo Barber II, who's pastor of Prospect AME Church. Reverend Barber, would you like to say hello to our audience tonight?
Well, absolutely. So glad to be with such a distinguished panel this evening, and so always happy to be with my friends at Fair Count. And I am excited about the conversation to come. All of us here at Prospect AME are just honored to be a part of engaging in our communities.
And we definitely thank you so much, Reverend Barber, for making the time to join us as well. To start tonight's conversation, we're actually going to begin it with actually rolling a brief video that answers some frequently asked questions about the vaccine. It features one of tonight's guests, Reverend Thompson, as well as the First Lady, and also our Fair Count colleague, Mrs. Teresa Thompson. So we'll roll that video and then we'll be right back to jump right into the questions.
Dr. Nichols, we were wondering, what is in the vaccine?
So what is in the vaccine is a type of medication that helps you fight against this particular virus.
So, Dr. Nichols, why do we have to get 2 shots?
Tell us, please.
If we don't even like shots. But why do we have to get 2?
Because one, you have to mount an immune response. And so since many people have not been exposed to the virus, the first one gives you so that you get your first level of exposure and your body starts fighting what they perceive to be the virus. And you get what we call antibodies. Those are ways that you fight that particular infection. So you get a partial immune response. And then when you get the second one, it jumpstarts that and you get a greater immune response. Very similar to other vaccines that people take when they were children. You have to take multiple doses so that you can be fully protected from that particular infection.
So, Dr. Nichols, we need to address this. Can you help us with why is the vaccine free?
The vaccine is free because the government, as we talked earlier, is helping to fund the vaccine so that we can ensure that everyone has the opportunity, regardless of their color, their race, their creed, their nationality, their citizenship or not. It is just a way that we can protect ourselves and to stop this devastation of this virus and to stop all the unnecessary deaths that have occurred as a result of this virus.
I hope that video answered some of the questions a lot of folks have, or they have had since we first started hearing about the COVID-19 vaccines. Now we're going to hop right into the questions for discussion and let our guests begin to weigh in. Our first question: the rates of infection and death from COVID-19 have been the highest in Black communities and communities of color. Though millions of people have been vaccinated, we know there's still distrust, misinformation, and a serious lack of access to the vaccine. Reverend Thompson, I'd like for you to kick us off. Then we have everyone just join in on our conversation. When you have conversations with other Black men in our communities, how much of this is being discussed, and what impact do you think this has on the number of Black men who become vaccinated?
Wow, thanks, Reggie. That's a wonderful question. You know, we as Black men can tell each other who gives the best haircuts. We can tell each other where the best car wash is. We can talk to each other about where the new wing spot is. But oftentimes we have trouble speaking to someone about something that's going to save our lives. And so I've discovered that if the conversation is not pushed, oftentimes it's not heard or it's not even being had in our communities. We need to do a better job because this affects some mother's child. If it affects some brother that we really want to be around and want to have around us for a long time. And so in our community, we have to push the conversation so that people understand that this is important for us as Black men, and it is needed to protect our communities and those that we love.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to pull Reverends or Pastors Chester and Barber into it. Gentlemen, would either of you like to weigh in?
I'll yield to the senior statesman, Pastor Barber, then I'll come behind him. You're muted.
With Pastor Thompson, because one of the challenges that we have is that sometimes speaking of medical issues and issues that are not, so to speak, around our table every day, it becomes a topic that is for somebody else. We have to learn how to connect the dots in our communities and be able to say, okay, this topic is relevant because it's not only is it affecting your livelihood, it's affecting your families, it's affecting your children, it's affecting their ability to get an education. COVID-19, I think, challenged all of the norms within our society, even within our cultures, because if we can't see it or touch it, sometimes it's not always relevant to us. And for the longest time, until we started to see people pass away, we didn't really even acknowledge in the Black community that COVID was a problem. It took a little while for it to catch up with us, but then when we saw the casualties and Black men, as Pastor Thompson says, we tend to talk about, where we can get the best haircuts, where we can go get our cars washed and all those kind of things. We're not monolithic, but it was just not at the top of the barbershop conversation. So now that we are where we are, I think that we have a great opportunity to share the knowledge that we have gained and be able to get other brothers engaged.
And thank you, Reggie, for the opportunity, and also to my cohorts for what you shared tonight. I will offer, just from a millennial point of view, is one of the hesitations, not only amongst men but also amongst just millennial men, is the information that has been shared concerning the vaccines. And on TV or on social media, in one breath you hear one thing, and then in the next instance you see or hear something else. And so there's a conflict of information, and then also there's a conflict of values, because a lot of us historically, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to put a disclaimer out here, right? Fair count does not necessarily validate anything that I say, but I'm going to go ahead and say it, is that historically Black men have not had a good relationship with the United States government, right? And so coming out of the political unrest and also the political untruths in which we witnessed in recent American history, there have been some personalities that have given us as men reason not to trust even the trusted voices within our community, right? There was one time, at one point in time, whenever the Black pastor validated something or said something, that people took that as a relatively absolute truth. But because there's so many different avenues for information and misinformation, and also with the history of African Americans and particularly African American males with the United States government, that has exacerbated the reasons why many men are hesitant. On top of the issues of, we just don't talk about those things at the barbershop, right? We'll hang out at the fish fry, but nobody's really asking, who's getting vaccinated or dropping the truth bombs about vaccination. And so in short, that's what I'll offer as, a reason why some are hesitant of taking the vaccine.
Thank you. And Dr. Chambers, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. I do agree with what the panelists have already brought up. The mistrust in the conflicting sources of information has been a huge problem. I think culturally, we are getting to a place where former authority figures, former people who historically, like pastors, that we used to hold as authority figures, we've had that undermined here lately, and so politicians as well, and rightly so in some circumstances, right? But it can cause people to paint with a broad brush and say, well, all authority figures shouldn't be listened to. We shouldn't hearken our ears to any of them. And so, and I feel like the average layperson would have a struggle sifting through the information to actually get to the truth, when you have all of these conflicting voices. And as we alluded to, these topics have not been customary topics for barbershop conversation amongst Black men. When you talk about health, you're showing a certain level of compassion for your brothers or your friends who you are talking to. And I think part of our masculinity and what we, the cliche of the toxicity of the masculinity sometimes is that we hesitate to show that level of compassion. And so we might be hesitating to discuss these things for those reasons as well.
Gotcha. Thank you all for that. Really, what you were just mentioning, Dr. Chambers, pretty much goes into our next question. And want to make sure that you all feel free to be able to join in. Just continue from that last topic to the point of, there have been a few updates concerning the vaccine recently. We all know that as of late, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, recently approved the Pfizer vaccine for adolescents 12 to 15 years old. We most recently heard, of course, guidance has been released that in most circumstances, people who are fully vaccinated can begin to stop wearing their mask to indoor and outdoor events. And then right here in Georgia, the 9 mass vaccination sites will begin to close in the coming days. Dr. Chambers, I wanted to keep it on you for a second. and wanted to ask you, but certainly get everyone else's opinion. What are some of the most frequent questions you receive about the vaccine? And what are some of the key things you believe people should know about the vaccine?
Yes. So frequently, I would say there are probably about 4 topics that tend to recur when people ask about the vaccination. They want to know about the ingredients, some of the things that are in the vaccine. People are concerned that some of the contents of the vaccine might be hazardous to their health. And and I don't want to condescend, but when we're talking about preserving genetic material, which these Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are messenger RNA. This is a type of genetic material which is very fragile and easily corruptible. When we're talking about keeping this structure intact so that the vaccine that you make is what gets into the arm of the patient, you just cannot use organic ingredients generally for that. I'm not a biochemist, but it's just not going to work to preserve it with sea moss extract or turmeric or the things that the spinach juice, whatever, kale extract. It's just not going to happen. It's going to degrade if you try to use those things that sound real good to us culturally right now in this day and age. So sometimes we have to use ingredients that in minuscule amounts are actually harmless to humans. Okay, but yes, they could be toxic if you gave them in high doses. But yeah, we are forced, if we're going to preserve these kinds of vaccines, to use ingredients that people may not want. Another thing that comes up is the mistrust. We have a history that can cause people to mistrust maybe the U.S. government or pharmaceutical companies, secondary to greed and things like that have happened historically. The Tuskegee Experiment, and people allude to the Tuskegee Experiment, especially among African Americans. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. Okay. So I want to, with the Tuskegee Experiment, that was a group of Black men who had a disease, syphilis, and the study was done such that we had a cure. We had penicillin. We had access to a cure, and that was withheld from this group. Okay. That analogy does not work for this particular situation we're in now. Right now, we have a global pandemic. Everybody is affected by this. The analogy would be to deny African Americans the treatment. If we were being denied the vaccine, then you maybe could look at the Tuskegee Experiment and say, "Oh, something similar is happening." But that's not actually what's happening right now. And one thing I can say, that you can trust pharmaceutical companies and the U.S. government to want to continue to make money. They don't want to see their consumers dying. They don't want to see their workforce sick and dying. The pharmaceutical companies do not want to be sued by people who are having adverse reactions or dying from the vaccines, which would happen if that were happening in a large scale. So that I can trust, right? And so that's my argument against that point. Also, people, ask questions like, well, this was, how can I trust it since this vaccination was rushed? They developed it so fast. And now, when we're talking about December, when the FDA first approved it, I could kind of see, you saying that. But now 260 million, 270 million people have had the vaccination, and we've had 4,400 deaths, maybe that we can't prove were actually related to the vaccine at all. And so, you know, we have that risk of death is about 1 in 60,000. If the worst case scenario were true, if every single death were attributable to the vaccine, the risk of death is 1 in 60,000. When you get in your car, the risk of death is 1 in 6,700. Okay, about 9 times higher every time you get in the car and go somewhere. If you were to get COVID, if I'm a young man, I'm healthy, I'm fit. All right, I work out, I exercise, I don't have any comorbidities, I don't have hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. My risk of death is 1 in 500 if I were to get COVID. 1 in 500 compared to 1 in 58,000. The risk of a severe allergic reaction to the vaccination is like 2 per million. So I just I mean, I try to just have the conversation, and to each question or to each hesitancy, I try to address it head on with factual information. And that's what physicians and providers should be doing. And those are the conversations we really need to be having. We need to get these kinds of truths out there.
Definitely. Thank you, Dr. Chambers. Before we move to our next topic, just want to open it up for any of our other guests. Have there, in addition to what you've already said, are there additional frequently asked questions that you all receive? And if so, what are some of those key ones?
Brother Reggie, I will chime in here. One of the initial responses to the vaccine, and it comes up here and there, is the economy of the vaccine, right? Of some people have hesitancy and questions about, well, if we're fighting one thing, why are there so many variations or so many brands of the vaccine, right? And when we start getting into that conversation, people convolute that with, oh, well, this is just a money-making thing for the healthcare industry, right? Or, the persons who are making this, especially with the promise of government contracts, things of that nature. And so once health, emotions, and economy starts getting all mixed up, there are a lot of people who go into left field. And then one of the other points, and I'll close on this one, although I am Baptist, this is going to be my last close, right? One of the other questions is, man, I shouldn't have told that joke. Now I've lost it, right? Oh, why when people start talking about the various reactions, right? Well, if we're all taking a vaccine, why is it that if I take Pfizer, I have one set of symptoms, right? And if I take the Moderna, I have another. And if I take Johnson & Johnson, they're different side effects, and people are just trying to sift through, well, which one is going to be best for me, right? And until I can reach a conclusion, and as I've heard some people say, until God actually shows me and tells me what I'm supposed to do, I'm not getting the vaccine, right? So there are a lot of things that go into play of people's hesitancy because of their uncertainty and the ambiguity that has come along with this vaccine. Thank you, sir.
Reggie, I'm sorry, just one more elephant in the room. As people of faith, we understand that there are a lot of faithful members, a lot of people of faith who are really concerned that this vaccine is the mark of the beast. No, it's not the mark of the beast foretold in Scripture. And so for a lot of people, they were worried because they were unsure of whether or not they were faithful to their God by taking such a vaccine. And so we have to ally those fears and suspicions and say to them, listen, I appreciate you being astute in your faith, but this is not the mark of the beast and nothing to worry about. You can safely get vaccinated. In fact, do it and do it today.
I'll also add to the comments from my brothers is that, to reiterate the lack of information that is available to us in our communities. I think that sometimes for lack of a better word, to be ill-informed or misinformed. Sometimes that's the same thing. We tend to think that, as Dr. Chambers mentioned, that this vaccine just popped up overnight. The truth of the matter is the COVID research has been going on for between almost 15 years. I mean, this is not a new situation for those who study vaccines. It's been in the works forever, but because we don't always have access to the information, the background as to how and what, we tend to not only make up our own information, but we tend to trust information from places that are not trustworthy. And then we have to be also come to grips with the fact that just because we are men of faith, that does not mean that within our communities that we are the trusted voices in every hour of every day. That is not true. So you have information flowing from places that may or may not be reliable. I will say that when our people have access, and this speaks to some of the greater inequalities and inequities within our communities, when our people have access to valid scientific information, then we do well. We do well. We are an adaptive people, and we have the ability to discern once we have the information. And, Pastor Thompson, I'll say this as well. Science does not conflict with our faith.
Absolutely.
So we need to make sure that we continue to beat that drum, because it is important. And many of us as clergy persons, we are dual in our expertise. Within the AME Church, within the Baptist community, and with our greater ecumenical community, there are folks with expertise in medicine, in science, and so forth. That was my career for 30 years in engineering and science for industry, and a quarter of that was spent in biopharmaceuticals. So, as we are doing what we do, let us also bring in the gifts that God has given us, from the pulpit to the pews to the people. It's got to flow. It can't just stay in one place.
Thank you all so much. I really hit it right on the head. And Pastor Barber, I wanted to go to our next topic of discussion. I wanted to come to you, Pastor Barber, to just kind of kick us off. As we all clearly very aware, the pandemic has changed our lives in so many different ways, especially when it comes to seeing each other, being together, and definitely when it comes to worshiping together. And this, of course, is to everyone, but wanted Pastor Barber to just kick us off. How has the pandemic affected the church, especially the Black church? Specifically, what changes have you had to make to the way the faith community worships? What changes may be lasting? And what role do you believe the church plays during this pandemic? Pastor Barber, if you don't mind kicking us off.
Absolutely. It's one of those where we should always remind ourselves, be careful what you ask for. When we ask God to use us and allow us to be front and center in his plan for his people, we should be careful how we ask, because the truth of the matter is we don't always know what type of box he's going to put that gift in. And I will say this: God does not send evil to us, but he does allow us to be a part of situations that challenge us. And in that vein, the pandemic has been a challenge not only to the Black church, but for the church in general as a whole throughout the world. But particularly in the Black church, it has forced us to be reminded how important innovation is. We can never be so complacent to think that we can sit back on our laurels and just do things the way we've always done them. For us personally, within our church family and within the ministry here at Prospect, it forced us into technology that we had not prepared for. It forced us to be more innovative in the way that we communicated with our parishioners, and then in our greater outreach. So, for example, instead of being face-to-face, we not only had to depend on virtual services and virtual meetings and virtual contact, but we also had to engage with partners that would help us to do that. So it moved us from this I think sometimes the Black church operates in isolation, because normally we're not called on until there is a crisis, right? But the pandemic has forced us to go outside of our walls and to create partnerships that allowed us not only to conduct ministry, but also to meet the needs in a relevant way of our communities, to partner with the medical profession. I was talking to Dr. West, because we were trying to work on an initiative. A brother in DC gave me a call and said that he wanted to do something in the South. And I said, well, I know a doctor here in Columbus, and let's see if we can get it off the ground. I mean, those are the kinds of things that that we've been forced into, that I think we would have probably taken longer to engage in. And then finally, I will say that on a very personal way, COVID-19 affected our ministry, because I contracted COVID-19. And it was ironic that I had gone an entire year almost, and felt that I was in the home stretch. I had gotten my first injection, and I was exposed just after that injection. And some people say, well, we know that you had gotten vaccinated, Pastor. I said, no, but listen, you got to pay attention. I had been vaccinated days before I contracted the virus. The vaccine did not have time to even signal my body to start to build antibodies. So, you know, I was able to experience the horrors of having COVID, and was pretty sick, and did have to be hospitalized for a day or so. And that helped me to appreciate the depth of fear that people may have, not only of the disease, but also of the vaccine. Because, you know, uninformed, a person would say, well, why should I get the vaccine and I get sick anyway? And then after recovering, having to speak to individuals and say, you know what, I did recover, and yes, I have natural antibodies from the virus. However, I still need to continue on the track and get the second injection. I received the Pfizer vaccine, and here's the reason why. Because just because we have antibodies naturally, that does not mean that we are protected against all of the variants. And there is no scientific evidence as of yet to say that that is the truth. However, there is scientific evidence to say that once vaccinated, we have protection against the majority of the variants that are out there. So, long story short, the exposure to the virus, the pandemic itself has forced us into areas of innovation and conversation that we might not have normally engaged in had we not been forced into it.
Thank you. I invite any of our other guests to kind of jump in.
Well, I'll go ahead. Pastor Barber, what a wonderful testimony. And, you know, again, what a relief to know that you made it through COVID. But what you said is indeed absolutely true. The pandemic has forced the church to be innovative. And there's nothing wrong with the church being innovative. In fact, the church ought to be innovative day in and day out. When we look at the early church cut its tooth on innovation. They didn't know what would be next. All they knew was that they had to keep doing what the Holy Spirit said do, and they had to keep being innovative in order to reach new people in new and innovative ways. For us here at The Drive, we have done fairly well. Our people have adapted. Our community has adapted to the pandemic. We found ways to communicate that were heretofore untried, and we used the opportunity to really focus on the majors and to minimize the minors. If there's anything a pandemic will do, is it will teach you what's important and
You
instruct
preaching,
you
Reverend.
about the
You
things that are
preaching.
not important. And so, at Columbia Drive and churches everywhere, if you didn't learn from this pandemic that a paradigm shift is not a bad thing, but a good thing, you have really missed, the point of what the pandemic can do to bless your ministry. So, has it been a shift? Yeah. Is it uncertain? Yes, it is. Is that a bad thing? Absolutely not. Maybe now the church can be the church.
Yeah, and I will chime in also, and just be honest or share, concurring with what Pastor Thompson and Pastor both have shared, that it's caused us to pivot, but it's been a rough year, right? It's been a rough year. I would say, in particular, I can only speak for Adrian Chester, right? It's been a year of being innovative, and while being innovative, still trying to figure out the next thing, right? It's Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
It's been mentally and emotionally rough, because for at least for me, and I'm sure my other colleagues, where when we receive a phone call of someone being in the hospital or someone transitioning, we could not be by the bedside or be with the family. That everything has had to be via phone call, right? And I just love being around people, right? And so for a whole year, I've had to really sit with myself. I've had to sit with myself, and that can be uncomfortable, right? And also hearing the weight of our congregants, of how they've dealt with separation, anxiety, and also loneliness, because there's some people who, for various reasons, their church family is their family, right? And people need that human interaction, and without it for the past year, it has been rough. But it has taught us a lot of lessons, as Pastor Thompson says, of that. We found out what are the essentials, right? And I've at the very beginning, I shared with Greta Bellwood, I'm not going to be the one to say, well, God told me that the reason the pandemic came is because of X, Y, and Z, right? I'm not that spiritually in tune yet, right? to be able to say that. But but it has been purposeful of us being able to get back to the basics of what worship, fellowship, and also service is all about. Because the way most churches have been able to interact for the most part is through the service projects that they have provided to their communities. Uh, you know, it's not a week that goes by that we don't hear about what Prospect is doing up in Fortson, Georgia. And there's also been areas where churches were trying to do stuff by themselves, where we've been able to see the power of collaboration, right? In particular, a group of churches from across denominations here in Columbus, we came together to do various service projects, to be the church in our community. So I will say it's had its good days, but it has been rough, emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically, and physically. And I encourage every pastor, if you're a person of faith watching this, I encourage you to allow your pastor to take a sabbatical as soon as possible, right? Because we're running on E right now.
Pastor Justin, you definitely are reading all in our minds, and really even reading the next question that we wanted to go to. And Dr. Chambers, I'd love to be able to get you to weigh in on this as well, but wanted to go to the next topic. You gave the perfect lead in, which is when it comes to a great many things, our community talks with and listens to people they trust. This month, May, is Mental Health Month. And as we travel the road to recovery through this pandemic, we don't speak enough about being sound in mind as well as body and spirit, exactly to your point. So, Reverend Chester, I'd like for you to be able to start us off and certainly want to get Dr. Chambers in on this question as well. But the question is, as men of faith and trusted voices with your friends and in your congregations, in your communities, what has the conversation been like about the real toll that the pandemic has had on our mental health and what we're doing to take care of ourselves and others? I know, Reverend Chester, you just said about the sabbatical, but wanted you to start us off about different ways we can make sure we're taking care of ourselves.
Yes, sir.
And our mental health.
I appreciate that, Reggie. I would encourage everyone, and one thing as we've done as a congregation is to take advantage of the faith-based mental health services that may be in your area. As we probably got 3 months into the pandemic in 2020, we saw that a lot of our congregation was struggling, especially like our former military. And so we started an intentional conversation with what we have here in Columbus called the Pastoral Institute, where they have trained clinicians that infuse spirituality with mental health coaching and counseling. And I just encourage everyone, right? Especially people of faith, as we begin the conversations to go back into our sanctuaries and start gatherings again as we once did, that we do need to take a check on our mental health and get the help that we need, and particularly not only adults but also our children, right, who will for the rest of their lives be traumatized by the past year. What we experienced with COVID-19 was not only health devastating, but it has also been mentally traumatizing to so many people, right? It's been mentally traumatizing to so many people that you having to explain to a little child why they cannot do school as they used to do it, or why they have to go around, with a mask on. This is a very traumatizing experience that all of us have faced, right? In unresolved trauma, we can stumble through it and cope with it, but if it's not dealt with, it will show up in one way or another in the future. So we've experienced a very traumatizing year, not only with COVID-19, but also with just the political garbage, right? Political garbage that we had to sit through at the beginning of this pandemic. And to see it unfold, we've had to deal with the trauma of racial tension and everything that America is. And this is another disclaimer, fair count, all that. I'm not trying to get y'all in trouble, right? But all the stuff that we've had to see, watch, right? You talk about George Floyd, you talk about Ahmaud Arbery. All of this has happened while we have been at home doing nothing else but watching the TV and just being re-traumatized all over again. So get the help, right? Churches, I encourage every church, like I said, let your pastor and staff go on sabbatical and bring on somebody periodically who's going to be able to help your church walk through those mental health needs of the congregation. I said a lot, and I hope I said something to help somebody.
I'm sure you did, and to your point, definitely Fair Count is a nonpartisan organization. But definitely thank you for your input and weighing in. And I wanted to grab Dr. Chambers, and I know on this subject as well, and then give our other two guests a chance to be able to talk. But also, want to see if we can keep it to about around minutes, because we have one or two other questions we have from the audience, and then we want to go into just our next part from there. So, Dr. Chambers, do you care to weigh in?
Absolutely. The past year has been very traumatic and put stress on relationships, on families, on children, and you have to just take time to focus in on talking to your family members, your friends, asking them how they're doing, getting them to talk through their feelings, and one way that I was able to help my own self being an essential worker, having to continue to be out in public and seeing patients and being exposed to people with COVID-19 knowingly, was I focused on exercise. And exercise can be very healing, very stress relieving. It can help with many types of mental illness, depression and anxiety. It can really help with those things. Taking time to spend out in nature was another thing that really helped me a lot. And I mean, these are things that we can do while we're having to isolate. And these are things that I was able to incorporate that helped me. But now that there is light at the end of this tunnel, that there's a vaccine, the best thing for our mental health would be to get the vaccine. I'm feeling right now. I almost feel past this pandemic on a personal level, with the confidence that I have to go out into the world and do the kinds of things that I enjoy doing. For Mother's Day, I took my wife and we were in Atlanta. We got to hang out at Pond City Market. We both are vaccinated and we didn't feel unsafe around a lot of people. And so that's very relieving. And it just getting beyond this traumatic experience is, I think, going to be healing in and of itself. So I would encourage everyone to get the vaccine, get past the worry that you feel about getting the vaccine, and get beyond the worry that you feel about catching COVID.
More, Dr. West, I think the liberation of the spirit and the body is going to be more therapeutic than any of us can imagine at this point. Just to be able to go to the places where we've been, where we once enjoyed ourselves, enjoy our families. In addition to that, I would also say that it's going to be vitally important for us, just as family members, and not only as pastors and faith leaders and first responders and trusted voices in our communities, but as people, we have to help individuals understand that the anxiety, the depression, all of the pressure that came along with dealing with the past year and the months after the first of this year, it's okay to feel drained and mentally stressed. And we have to help each other to destigmatize the need for conversations around how we feel mentally, and to be able to engage with healthcare professionals that are trained specifically in areas of mental health. I mean, again, I said it at the start. Science does not conflict with our faith. Everything that is good comes from God. That we believe that. And so, how can we argue that good mental health is not a good thing, or having persons to engage with that have the background and the ability to move us beyond our darkness from a physical and mental perspective, along with our spiritual journey? Those are great gifts. And I think that is vitally important, especially in the Black and Brown community, because traditionally we have not been afforded the opportunity to be okay with mental illness. It was something that we often hid, or it was something that we felt that we weren't allowed to feel somehow. But I think the pandemic has been a great equalizer when it comes to culture, society, and our greater recognition of inequities in our communities. So I would say, do everything we can to destigmatize. Let us lift up individuals, and let us make it okay to admit that we need to sit down and talk with somebody, and perhaps that will allow us to spread the good news that there is help, even in the anxieties of dealing with this pandemic as we've had to face it this past year.
My colleagues have really hammered home the importance of mental health and taking care of ourselves. And so let me just end this segment with a word of encouragement. The line to one of my favorite poems is, I have to live with myself, and so I want to be fit for myself to know. And so if this pandemic has taken a toll on you, don't hide it. Don't push it to the side. Be fit for yourself and take it upon yourself to get the help that you need so that you can be the very best you for your friends, for your family, and for your society. We need you.
Yes, thank you to all of you for definitely answering that question. We wanted to, I believe you all have really addressed some of the answers to some of the questions that we've received tonight. There's one question I wanted to be able to throw out, and we're beginning to get to the end of our event and all of our segments. But one question I want to throw out that I believe we began to kind of talk about, one to throw out there that we received, and the question was, and this can go to certainly anyone, but just being aware of time, we'll pose it to just the first person who kind of chimes in here. And the question is, do you all believe there's a message in this pandemic?
Absolutely. Okay,
And
I'll jump in. I'll be the guy. Yeah, absolutely. There's a message that there are, again, great equalizers in the world that we live in. Every journey that we take, whether it is tragic or whether it is a mountaintop experience or whatever, there is a story to be told, and the story is for us to tell it. It is important not to allow others to tell our story. No one can tell the experience of being Black or brown in the midst of a pandemic with all of the inequalities and the inequities within our communities, and then come out of it like we can. This will be a deciding moment as to how the world looks at Black and brown communities. And we need to make sure that we build off of the strength that we have gained through perseverance. If we can make it through COVID-19, we can make it through everything. We can make it through bad policy. We can make it through difficulties in education. We can make it through economic downturns and economic inequities. We can make it. Why? Because we have seen the worst and we've survived. There's nothing like that experience of survival.
Pastor Barber summed it up for me.
Yes, sir. And I definitely thank you for it. So I know we're nearing the end of our program, but I wanted to be able to just get a final word from you all and just pose really just a final question as we're wrapping up this conversation. And we'd love for each of you to take about just 2 minutes. I know we're getting to the end, but we'd love to just pose the question and hear your answer to the following question, which is, as this being Black Men Count, as more Black men are making a decision to take the vaccine, but certainly as more people in general are making a decision to take the vaccine, what charge would you give to them? And I'd love for us to start off with Reverend Chester. We can go then to Reverend Barber, Thompson, and then finish it out with Dr. Chambers. But again, the question is, more Black men and certainly more people are making a decision about taking the vaccine.
You went out on my end, Brother Reggie, so I knew I didn't catch the whole question.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can ask it one more time. Yeah, I think I may have might have dropped out a little bit. I was saying that that final question is, as more people are making the decision to take the vaccine, what charge would you give to them this evening? And that's for everyone.
I would say just get the information, find trusted voices within your community, and research and hear the testimony of others with their experiences. That's one thing we have encouraged at Greater Bellwood for as we do our weekly check-ins. For if there's anyone who's taken the vaccine, feel free at your comfort level to share your experiences because it may be your experience that is the deciding factor for someone willing to take the vaccine.
And I think Reggie, you were asking that I come in after Pastor Adrian. I would say the challenge is before us, that we have no excuse not to have conversations. Let us engage with one another, engage with our communities. That is the challenge that is before us. We do not have the luxury to sit back and allow others, again, to do any of our heavy lift, to tell our story, to chart a course for us through difficult waters. Engage on a personal level, engage on a community level. Let us pull our churches into the conversation. We are the church, the people. It's not the building. We are the church, and therefore our own personal experiences, brick by brick, form a foundation with our communities that give us the title of being trusted voices. If we tell our story, tell it in a trustworthy way, then folks will listen. And by listening, then that story will spread from here to there and everywhere. I want to just make a quick PSA. On Sunday at 1:30 at Prospect AME Church here in what we call now North Columbus, Sports in Georgia, we will partner with Faircount. We'll be partnering with Faircount with a vaccine drive from 1:30 to 5:30 on Sunday. And we will be here in the parking lot with our partners at CORE. Faircount was kind enough to allow us to participate as a part of the faith-based community. And we are excited to be able to offer free vaccines to anyone who is interested. And in addition to that, we want to invite others to pick up on the programs that have been put in place and spread them throughout their communities. Let us participate in our own miracle. Let us participate in the miracle instead of simply waiting for it to fall from the sky. We look forward to a great event, and you can visit with us at prospectamechurch.com.
I'll close with just a reminder that one of the greatest books in the Old Testament, the book of Exodus, talks about a pivotal moment in the life of Israel that happened during Passover. And that moment happened with instruction from God to Moses and from Moses to the people. God instructed Moses to inform the people to put the blood of the lamb on the lintel and the doorpost of every home. And the promise was, when I see the blood, I will pass over this house. I want you to understand that, my brothers and sisters, we have to participate in our own rescue. There's something that we can do to ensure that this pandemic will pass us by. And that admonition is simple. Get vaccinated. Get vaccinated so your children have another day to look at you. Get vaccinated so that your mother doesn't have to worry about you contracting COVID-19. Get vaccinated so that you can be here for those that love you and that need you, and be a voice, be a champion for those who are uncertain. Give them the facts. Teach them that this is the way that we get out of this and into a life of normalcy. And when we do that together, we'll get over this hump and move towards a greater destiny and a greater future that will be before us and take us into the places that we can go, as Pastor Barber said, and be and do anything, because if we can get through this, we can get through anything. God bless you. Enjoy being here.
Amen. I agree that what Pastor Barber said, all good things come from God. This vaccination is a medical miracle. It really is. For us to have such a efficacious vaccine, a vaccine that works so well, that was developed so quickly. It is a medical miracle. I encourage all people of faith to take advantage of it and to have faith. Give God some credit. He trains, he gives us science, he gives us knowledge, he gives us the ability to go out into the world and learn about his creation. And I just praise the Lord that we've been able to do that to the degree that we have. And I thank God that I was able to get the vaccine when I did, and that it was, my family has been preserved so far through this. Most of my family members have been vaccinated, and I'm glad that I was able to be in a position to educate them when they had questions. And I just encourage people to be a testimony, and really getting the vaccine is going to help somebody else, and it's going to help us all collectively. We are, we're starting to be worried about new variants and things like that. Well, getting the vaccine and stopping the spread of the disease will stop the development of new variants. So if you don't want to have booster shots in the future, then get the vaccine now, so that we don't have it spreading and these new variants developing, so that we won't need booster shots. We can kill this now. So, I just encourage everyone, and I thank every panelist here. I thank y'all for this opportunity. This is great work that Fair Count is doing, and it's God's work.
Well, we certainly thank you all for joining us this evening. Tonight's conversation has been informative and has provided information about the vaccine that we all can use. Certainly on behalf of Fair Count, we want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. We'd like to thank our guests, Reverend Thompson, Reverend Barber, Reverend Chester, and Dr. Chambers, for taking the time to join our conversation. If you are interested in finding a vaccine site or learning more about the vaccine, please visit us at countmeinga.org. Count Me In is our campaign to get information and resources to communities being overlooked or underserved in COVID recovery efforts. It is a partnership between Fair Count, which works to ensure everyone counts in every aspect of civic life, and the Southern Economic Advancement Project, which explores policy ideas that address how race, class, and gender intersect social and economic policy in the South. Again, that website is countmeinga.org. The final thing is that this weekend, to Pastor Barber's point, we'll be participating in what we're calling Souls to the Shots. And if you want to learn more information about upcoming events, upcoming vaccine events, again, please visit countmeinga.org. Thank you all again. Thank you to our guests, and thank you all to our audience for listening. You enjoy your evening.